It was April 1997 when a quiet taxi driver was arrested. Although he was initially suspected of 2 murders and some robberies, in less than 24 hours he will break down and reveal crimes that spanned over a 10-year period. Some such heinous crimes that when you actually hear about them, you will wonder how he was not arrested long before. He killed a friend in his own home, and it took him a week to clear away the tracks. He set fire to a woman who refused to make love to him, having first passed through various bars, meeting people, and leaving traces of his presence. It is really hard to believe that the police then could not arrest this man, preventing so many crimes that could have been avoided. He will remain in the public consciousness as the Short Killer because of what he said, that he had felt a complex about his height and that he was teased and he had bought a weapon to feel taller. He had a short temper, that is for sure. The newspapers and television programs at the time caught up on this, and it was customary then to launch a racist culvert that would target and blame all small stature people. Dimitris Vagrinos was born in 1963 and was the second of 4 children coming from a very poor family. An antisocial and bad student, he only finished the primary level of school, leading him to be only capable of dealing with the animals of his family. His first profession was as a shepherd. In 1975, and at the age of 13, he left his village to escape his father, who would beat him hard at any opportunity. He was a drunk, he would later tell the police. Initially, he relocated to Athens and worked in a taverna in Chasia, which belonged to his mother's relatives, and then, with the help of a social worker, he entered an institution in Elefsina. He stayed there for 2 years. During his stay there, he trained as an electrician at the Scaramanga shipyards. He received his specialty diploma and continued working for the same company until 1992, when he began training for the profession of a taxi driver. In 1990, he met his first wife, Litsa Gerasimou. They married, but stayed together for only 14 months. "We did not work out," his first wife will say. "It was a life without anything special. We were locked in the house all day. He had no friends, nor did he want us to go anywhere. He did not bring his father to our wedding. He said he was a drunk, and he did not like him. He only brought his mother, and he still did not let her enter the church. A month after our wedding, he suddenly left our house without saying anything, but then he came back." Several years later, Vagrinos will claim to the police that his mother-in-law was beating him, but she, speaking to reporters, would deny his claims. "Shortly before they separated, my daughter and I were sitting and drinking coffee in the kitchen. My other child's baby was with us. Suddenly, I saw him asking my daughter for a health booklet. As soon as she came out onto the porch, I saw him hitting her. I immediately ran out to ask him why he was beating her, and at that moment, he slapped me too. The two would separate, as he did not want to have children. They bring problems," he would later tell her. In 1992, Vagrinos stopped working at Scaramanga shipyards. "He must have received over $1 million in compensation," his ex-wife would say. "I did not see a drachma from this money. Instead, he told me that it was my turn to work and that he should rest, that is, to feed him. And that's how the quarrels began." Vagrinos returned in the evenings, and Gerasimou no longer endured his behavior. Then he will commit his first recorded criminal act. He burnt his father-in-law's summer house in Salamina to take revenge upon them, and then he broke into Keretzini's house. He was sentenced in absentia to 2 years with his sentence suspended. After 1992, he worked exclusively as a taxi driver, and in the summer of 1996, he will get married for a second time to Kula Hadzivoyanaki. They resided together in an apartment in Moskhatu until the day he is arrested. All this time, under the noses of friends and relatives, this quiet man, as he was described, will kill 5 people and leave 2 more crippled. And he will do all this without any real reason, only because he considered that he was insulted with his imagination many times betraying him and leading him to arbitrary conclusions. His first victim was Panayotis Gaglias, a burglar known in the Athens underworld as Butterfly, and just 1 month after the former's release from prison in July 1987. The 2 of them hung out often and would often drink until the morning, as a typical newspaper of the time wrote. But their relationship was not the best. For example, one day, Panayotis asked Vakrinos to lend him the car he had rented for half an hour, but he finally returned it to him late at night. When Vakrinos asked him to explain himself, he cursed him, saying, "What are you going to do to me?" He would later find out that Panayotis had also stolen a shotgun from him. So one night they went out. They returned to Vakrinos' house, drunk, and quarrelled again. Panayotis fell asleep, and drunkenly muttered in his sleep, "Fall asleep, do not get up, and be even more unbearable." Then Vakrinos exited his home to find an iron bar, and upon returning, he hit him like a maniac several times on the head, until he was sure that he was dead. Then he went to Monastiraki to buy a knife in order to cut his corpse into pieces. Eventually he regretted it, and he went home, put his dead friend in some bags, and loaded him in the trunk of his car. He wandered for several hours and finally threw him in a deserted location at the 90th kilometer of the national road of Argos, Tripoli. The body was found by chance by a shepherd on August the 14th of the same year. Vakrinos stayed at his sister's house for a week to hide and then returned to his own to clean up the blood. He had committed his first murder and no one had suspected anything. Only after the first murder did I have nightmares, he would later tell the Star News reporters. For a year and a half, and then I was okay. I slept peacefully. At that time, I was killing, my eyes were blurred. I did not understand anything. Once you start, then it's difficult to stop. A 25-year-old girl, Anastasia Simidzi, boarded his taxi shortly after midnight on November the 20th, 1993 in Aya Varvara and asked him to take her to Pasalimani. During the drive, they started a conversation and she opened up to him, telling him that she was having problems with her boyfriend with who she was living with. Other reports will write that her boyfriend had just broken up with her. Vakrinos asked her to have a drink with him in a bar to get to know him better, and she accepted. Then, the short-fused taxi driver asked her to follow him to a hotel to make love. However, she refused. Some other reports state that she laughed at him and called him short. He was furious, but he hid his anger very well. He put her in his taxi to take her home, and on his way to Mandra, he stopped at a gas station where he bought a can of gasoline. A little later he drove to a deserted location and dosed his cab with gasoline. As soon as the girl realized what was going to happen, she proposed to make love to him, but the ruthless murderer told her, "Now you can make love on your own," and then he burned her alive. 4 years later, he would tell a journalist of Eleftherotypia, "That girl I burned alive, it was a bad time. I was blurred by hormones. You understand? A customer came in and we ended up drinking together. Then she did not want to take our acquaintance any further. It was the hormones' fault." On December the 21st, 1995, he cold-bloodedly killed Kostas and Andonis Spiropoulos. The killer felt that he was financially wronged by the two brothers, when he sold them a car for 600,000 drachmas instead of the 700,000, which was the original agreement. So he decided to take the car back with the key he was holding onto. Unfortunately for him, the Spiropoulos brothers heard him at the last minute and started chasing after him in another car. Vakrinos ran out of gas and was forced to stop at a gas station, where he was followed by the Spiropoulos brothers. They tried to immobilize him without knowing that he was carrying weapons. Vakrinos opened fire and emptied all of his bullets from his gun into their bodies. He then returned to his car, took out a second gun and shot the two brothers again before disappearing. When you saw them crawling on the floor, did you not feel sorry for them? Why did you shoot them again? The prosecutor asked him during his trial. I did it so that they would not betray me. If I had not already injured them, I would have left. In order not to be betrayed, I entered the gas station to make sure that I killed them. He would also confess to the police that he wanted to steal the car in order to kill a young motorcyclist who he found earlier that day in Moscato while parking. He had kept his license plate number and intended to find him and hit him with his car. The name of the motorcyclist was never revealed, nor did he ever know how lucky he was that day. In 1993, and while he's in a taxi rank in Elefsina waiting for a customer, his colleague Theodoros Andreavis broke the order queue and stole a customer from Vakrinos, telling him that you are a taxi driver from Athens, go there. This will be his next victim. He described during the representation of the crime, I killed him because he created a problem in Elefsina, in the square. I was first. I waited 20 minutes. He came later and took the fare from me. That was not exactly the problem. I then made my move and got his number plate's number. He then came out in anger and insulted me and made a move to hit me. He was stopped by a colleague. What he did bothered me a lot. Better to kill me than that move that he made. It was not about the 100 or 500 drachmas that I lost. I was angered that he took a swing at me. Vakrinos would not forget this insult. It will take 4 months for the taxi driver to forget his face, and on January the 9th, 1994, he boarded Andreavis' taxi, pretending to be a customer, and asked him to take him to Corinth. At the bridge of Loutraki, he asked him to stop so he could defecate. When he was done, he asked for some water to wash his hands. The driver will get out of his car to bring him the water he was storing in the trunk. The moment he is standing and his back is turned to Vakrinos, Vakrinos shot him at close range 5 times with his .45, killing him instantly. He will leave him at that point, stealing his taxi and returning to Elefsina. To eliminate his traces, he burnt the taxi in a deserted location. He would not hesitate to attend his funeral, a move that showed a lot about his psychological situation. On March the 14th, 1993, at the Botanical Garden, Nectaria Yannis and her friend Panayotis Benakis met with 2 of her friends, Andreas Sviros and Theodoros Bitoula. Jokingly, Sviros and Bitoulas called Benakis a rude word. At that moment, the now serial killer taxi driver happened to pass near the couple and heard the swearing, and he felt insulted. He immediately pulled out his .45 and shot Sviros and Vitoulas. He shot the first in the eye and jaw, and the former in the spine. Sviros to this day lives with one eye. In the report of the Eleftherotypia, the incident is presented a little differently. It was wrote that the 2 young men said to their friend, after you are done with her, bring her to us. And when Vakrinos remarked to them, trying to defend her honor, they told him to go to hell, you short-sighted midget. On December the 10th, Vakrinos broke into Maria Christoforatos' car in Sepolia. The moment he picked up various objects from the car, he was noticed by a group of young people. Among them were Vasilis Viplas and Yurios Kafkas. The two young men chased him to subdue him, but he will also shoot them with his 45mm. He will hit Viplas in the right hand and Kafkas in the chest and spine. The former was left disabled. Both were honoured by the Ministry of Public Order for their self-sacrifice with a medal and 1.5 million drachmas. Vakrinos also committed at least 5 robberies in supermarkets in Nicaea, Egalio, and Athens Avenue. A common feature of all the robberies was that he was near his sister's house, something that would later help the police in his arrest. It is worth noting that one of his robberies at a gas station, which did not go as he wanted, was not even done for the money. It happened because he wanted to take revenge on an employee with who they had at some point had a misunderstanding. In May 1996, Vakrinos committed another murder. He killed Serafim Ayanivis because, as he later claimed to the police, he had ruined a relationship with a girl he was in love with, and for that he had to die. Vakrinos visited the victim's house in Peristeri wearing a black hood. The bell rang, but at that time Ayanivis was absent, and his mother, who saw the hooded man through the door, alerted the police. The killer hid and waited until Ayanivis appeared, then shot him dead. Neither the police officers who had arrived to investigate the complaint, nor the victim's father, who were seriously injured, escaped the fire of the killer. The injury of their colleague angered the police, who set out to arrest the perpetrator. On April the 9th, 1997, as he was eating with his best man at the tavern where his second wife worked, the police arrested him. The noose had already begun to tighten around him, but he had not realized anything. A key point will be the testimony of a neighbor of Ayanivis. The woman will tell the police that she saw the man who was shooting leaving in a taxi, even describing his appearance. The police will start examining the taxi drivers in the nearby squares and ask them if they met a man that night that fits this profile. According to Eleftherotypia, they were looking for him for 14 months, examining more than 1,500 suspects, until a police officer thought, what if the perpetrator was not a customer, but a taxi driver? At the same time, the ballistic investigation of the police had shown that the policeman was injured by the same weapon with which a series of robberies had been committed in the nearby area. They had now sketched the profile of the man they were looking for. They knew his characteristics and the fact that after he did what he did, he disappeared quickly, but always committed crimes in the same area. The police will find out about him. They will wonder where he found so much money to support his sister financially, and at the same time, dusting off old cases, they will see the following pattern. The man who had sold the car to the Spiropoulos brothers was called Vakrinos. He could have opened it with a spare key. When they arrested him and under interrogation, to make him break, they asked, "Where is the 48 dude?" And there, without waiting, Vakrinos did not only admit to what they accused him of, but also confessed to the rest of his crimes. Impressed by Vakrinos' detailed testimony, security officials revealed that the killer taxi driver had the ability to remember mopeds and car numbers, addresses and other details about his potential victims. His crimes made headlines. TV shows devoted hours to his crimes. Outside the prosecutor's office, Vakrinos will respond to the journalists who besieged him for a statement. What can I say? I'm a beast. I have to pay. They will ask him if he has psychological problems, and he will answer, well, to get here, I must have something. I deserve the execution. During the representation of his crimes, dozens of people will gather and curse him. They will call him murderer, midget, gnome, and mouse. On May the 12th, and almost a month after his arrest, he was found hanged in his cell. The fact that he was constantly receiving threats from other inmates made the guards put him in solitary confinement to protect him. He was being held in a special cell together with 5 other detainees who were going through the same thing. In the morning of that day, and when the prisoners went out into the courtyard, he said that he wanted to take a bath. He formed a loop with 2 strings, one end tied through his neck, and the other tied to a tube on the roof. He climbed onto the sink, jumped, and hung himself. He did not leave any note behind. The person who provided him with the laces has also remained unknown to this day. He was under constant protection, and any object he could use to commit suicide had been removed from him, as he had not hidden his intention of killing himself. In fact, every 15 minutes a prison guard would go to his cell to see what condition he was in. Let him judge him. I am not a saint to decide. And thus closed the funeral procession in the cemetery of the Resurrection in Piraeus by the priest. And there was the end of the menacing evil life of a serial killer, taxi driver with a short fuse.